The courtroom felt like a sealed chamber, heavy with cameras, whispers, and the scent of old wood polished too many times. I could hear the soft clicks from the press gallery, the faint shuffle of papers behind me, and somewhere in the back row, the slow exhale of someone waiting for a life to end. My voice sounded steadier than I felt as I read the verdict. The court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. The words cut through the room like a blade through quiet air. Marcos Vega didn't look surprised. He only leaned back in his chair, smiling with that calm arrogance men like him always wore, the kind that made you want to wipe it off their faces. His lawyer looked at the floor. The journalists leaned forward. I could almost feel the temperature drop. When I struck the gavel, the echo was sharp and final. One sound, then another. That was how justice was supposed to feel: precise, contained, irreversible. But when I rose from my chair, my hand trembled once before I hid it behind a folder. As the clerk announced recess, the courtroom erupted into motion. Reporters shouted questions, the bailiffs formed a line, flashbulbs burst like lightning. I walked toward the side exit reserved for judges, every step rehearsed, every breath counted. The wooden door closed behind me, sealing away the noise. 2 federal agents stood waiting. Their suits were plain, their posture stiff, their eyes sweeping every corner like scanners. Between them stood a woman I hadn't seen before. She wasn't tall, but she carried herself with the kind of stillness that draws attention even when she doesn't move. "Justice Cross," she said. Her voice was calm, low, carrying command without volume. "I'm Agent Jennifer Hale. You're under protective detail effective immediately." I stopped. "Protective detail?" "Yes, ma'am," she replied. "Your name hit a red flag on multiple encrypted channels within minutes of sentencing. You've been officially classified as a priority threat target." For a moment, I thought she was exaggerating. Then I saw her eyes. No performance, no panic, only calculation. "I don't need protection," I said. "I've handled threats before." "Not like this," she answered. She glanced toward one of the agents, who handed her a tablet. She turned it around so I could see. My face filled the screen beside a photo of my townhouse, a plate number, and a timestamp no more than 20 minutes old. My pulse slipped out of its steady rhythm. Jennifer didn't gloat. She simply locked the tablet, tucked it under her arm, and said, "We'll relocate you to a secure route immediately. You'll have full coverage until further notice." The words "full coverage" grated against my pride. This is my courthouse. My case. My jurisdiction. "Your safety falls under mine now," she replied. "We both answer to the same flag, Judge, just in different uniforms." Her tone wasn't disrespectful. It was steady, professional, annoyingly right. I wanted to argue, but the part of me that understood risk stayed silent. As we walked down the private hallway, the air hummed with fluorescent light. My heels clicked against marble in rhythm with hers, slower, heavier, perfectly measured. Every sound seemed magnified, every shadow sharper than usual. "Who ordered this?" I asked. "The U.S. Marshals," she said. "We coordinate with local enforcement, digital security, and field response. You'll have full-time surveillance until we neutralize the threat." Neutralize. The word didn't belong to my world. I dealt in convictions, in laws and precedents, not bullets and crossfire. Yet hearing it from her sounded inevitable, like weather already moving in. We turned a corner and entered a smaller service corridor leading to the underground garage. The noise of the city bled faintly through concrete. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. A black SUV idled near the ramp, windows tinted, engine running. Another vehicle waited behind it. I wondered which one was decoy. Jennifer motioned toward the first car. "We'll move you through the judge's corridor to the exit bay. No stops." Driver verified. Her hand brushed lightly against my arm, guiding me toward the door. The contact was brief, professional, but my nerves reacted like static. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. The sky looked bruised, the kind of gray that promised a long storm. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes, I said, trying to sound composed. Then we'll make it in 15, she replied. I'm not in the habit of being escorted like contraband. You won't be contraband, she said, and there was a flicker of something in her voice. Humor, maybe. You'll be an asset. We treat assets carefully. I exhaled through my nose, more irritation than surrender. You talk like a machine. Machines malfunction, she said quietly. I don't. Her driver opened the back door. I climbed in, the seat leather cold against my palms. Jennifer took the front passenger seat, her tablet open to a grid of security feeds. The vehicle rolled forward. We passed through the underground exit, merging into traffic. The rain began, slow and deliberate. I watched water streak down the window, each droplet cutting the city into blurred lines. From the front seat, Jennifer said, "You'll have a temporary relocation order by morning. Until then, my team rotates in shifts here." I looked at her reflection in the window. Her jaw was tense, her eyes scanning every car we passed. "Do you always talk like that?" I asked. "Like what?" "Like someone who hasn't exhaled in a decade." A faint pause. "It helps keep people alive." Something about the simplicity of that answer unsettled me more than the threat itself. The silence stretched, filled only by the rhythm of rain. At the next red light, she turned slightly, just enough to meet my eyes in the rearview mirror. "I know this feels invasive," she said. "But it's the difference between safety and a headline with your name in past tense." I didn't answer. The line between warning and prophecy was too thin. When the light turned green, she looked away first. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the strange pull of curiosity. There was no warmth in her expression, yet something about her restraint felt almost human in its precision. By the time we reached the courthouse annex for my meeting, I was no longer sure if I resented her or needed her. Jennifer stepped out first, scanning the street before opening my door. Her movements were clean, mechanical, practiced. She shielded me from the drizzle with her own coat, then motioned for the driver to stay alert. Inside the building, fluorescent lights hummed again, the same tune as before. I could still smell rain on her jacket, faint metal under it, and that cold focus people get when they've spent too long under pressure. "Do you always work like this?" I asked as we reached the elevator. "Like what?" "Like you're already in the middle of a firefight." Her lips barely curved. "Because I usually am." The elevator doors closed, sealing us in silver light. I caught our reflections side by side, both too still, too aware. When the doors opened again, she said, "We'll stay close until this stabilizes." "How close?" "Close enough," she replied, then walked ahead. For the rest of the day, I went through motions that suddenly felt foreign, signing documents, reading reports, pretending control. But the truth followed me like her shadow. The world outside that courtroom had changed. That evening, when I looked out my office window and saw her waiting beside the car in the rain, hair damp, posture steady, I realized something dangerous had already begun. Not the threats, not the headlines, but the quiet pull between two people who understood risk in different languages and had just been forced to translate. And somewhere deep inside, where logic should have been, a small voice whispered what I refused to admit aloud. This wasn't protection. It was ignition. My townhouse had never felt smaller. Within hours, it was crawling with security technicians, cables, cameras, locks, sensors, and people who spoke in acronyms. They stripped away privacy like paint from old wood. Every door beeped, every window had a coded latch. My sanctuary turned into a grid of protocol. Jennifer Hale managed it all with unnerving calm. She moved through my home as if she had lived there before. Her voice carried across rooms, quiet yet absolute. Perimeter secured. Cameras live. Windows sealed. She didn't ask for permission. She simply informed, adjusted, confirmed. When she was finished, the space felt different. The air was too still, like something had been exhaled and not replaced. I tried to read in the living room, but the hum of the surveillance monitor followed me. When I poured wine, the glass shook against the counter. Jennifer appeared at the doorway. Her presence filled it. "That won't help you sleep," she said. I wasn't trying to sleep. "Then it won't help you think either." I didn't answer. The defiance I meant to show fell apart before it reached my tongue. She wasn't condescending. She was stating a fact. That night the rain came heavy. I heard it tapping against the roof, streaming down the windows, blending with the low static of the city. I told myself to ignore the sound of boots outside and the muted radio voices at the gate. I failed. Near midnight, I stepped into the hallway. The lights were low, warm pools of amber breaking the shadows. A soft beam of white moved across the wall. Jennifer stood by the window, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. The rain slicked against the glass, shining across her face in fragments. She looked over when I approached. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. I wasn't asleep, I said. Neither was I. Her voice carried a fatigue that didn't sound like weakness. It was the kind of exhaustion that still kept its spine straight. I asked, do you ever stop working? When the people I protect stop being targets. I wanted to argue again, to reclaim control over my own home, but the sight of her in that half-light silenced me. The curve of her shoulders, the faint scar near her collarbone, the steadiness of her stance. I wondered what it would take to shake that composure. A sudden crash outside made her spin toward the door, gun drawn. I froze. She moved before I could speak, pulling me back into the wall, her hand firm on my arm. My heartbeat stuttered against her sleeve. She listened, body tense, eyes sharp, the barrel of her weapon angled toward the floor. Rain kept hammering the windows. A second passed, maybe two. Then she exhaled slowly. Just a branch. Wind caught it. Her hand stayed on my arm longer than it needed to. The contact was light but certain, warm against my skin. You need to stay behind me when things go wrong, she said. Seems like I already do, I replied. Something flickered in her expression, gone too fast to name. She stepped back, holstering her gun. Get some rest, Judge. I told you to call me Nikki. I'll call you that when it's safe enough to forget titles. She left the hallway without looking back. The scent of her lingered, faint metal mixed with rain and something human that didn't belong to any uniform. I stood there a moment longer, trying to convince myself that this was temporary, that I was still in control. The thought didn't convince me. Morning brought gray light and silence. The city outside was slow, wet, impatient. My coffee went cold before I finished half of it. Jennifer was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a laptop and a black notebook. Her hair was pulled back, her jacket folded on the chair beside her. You start early, I said. I never stopped. Do you plan to sit there all day? Until the next shift rotates in. Her answers were always the same length, never wasted, never warm. I wanted to break through them, to hear what her voice sounded like when it wasn't wrapped in duty. Do you ever talk about anything that isn't work? I asked. Not usually. Why not? Because conversation slows reaction time. I let out a soft laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. You sound like you're built from steel. Steel bends, she said. You just have to know when to stop pushing. That shut me up. I sat across from her, watching her type, the lines of code reflected in her eyes. The precision fascinated me more than I wanted to admit. The day blurred through briefings, phone calls, small updates from law enforcement. By afternoon, the monotony became suffocating. I stepped out to the small balcony for air. Rain had eased to a drizzle. Across the street, cars crawled through puddles, horns muffled by distance. Below, 2 agents stood near the curb, blending with the neighborhood like ghosts in black coats. One looked up, spotted me, and touched his earpiece. A second later, Jennifer's voice came from behind me. You're not supposed to stand there without clearance. Do I need permission to breathe now? She joined me at the railing. Only if you plan to do it near glass. I turned to face her. You really believe all this will make me safer? I believe it'll make you alive long enough to hate it. Her honesty disarmed me. There was no bravado, no arrogance. Just realism honed by experience. We stayed there a moment, the city stretching before us in steel and mist. I could hear her breathing, steady and low. My own matched it without meaning to. Later, after the agents left and night returned, the house settled into its new rhythm. The monitors blinked, The radio clicked every few minutes. The hum of equipment filled the silence between us. I found her again in the living room, seated by the window, her sidearm resting on the table beside an untouched cup of coffee. "You ever get tired of this?" I asked. "Of what?" "Living like every second is a countdown." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes followed a pair of headlights moving across the street. "You don't get tired," she said eventually. "You adapt." I walked closer. "And after you adapt? Then you start forgetting who you were before." Her voice was quiet but raw. It pulled something in me I hadn't expected. I sat down opposite her, close enough to see the faint line of exhaustion beneath her eyes. "You're not just here because of a threat," I said. "You're here because someone decided I wasn't capable of keeping myself alive." She studied me for a moment. "That's not true. You're capable. You're just not armed." I leaned forward slightly. "And you think you are?" "I know I am." For a heartbeat, the air between us tightened. Then a sudden rumble of thunder rolled through the window, sharp and deep. She didn't flinch. I did. "You're jumpy," she said. "You're too calm." "Balanced," she replied. "That's how we survive." Her words stayed with me long after she returned to her post. Near midnight again, another gust shook the windows. I woke without realizing I had fallen asleep. The room glowed faint blue from the security monitors. I stepped quietly to the hall and saw her silhouette once more, framed by the faint shimmer of city lights. This time she didn't notice me watching. She was leaning against the doorway, whispering into her earpiece, voice low, calm, precise. I could hear only fragments. Perimeter clear. Rotation complete. Visual stable. Her composure was almost inhuman, but her hand trembled once when she reached for the radio. The movement was tiny, human, enough to make me forget the rules I was supposed to follow. I stood there longer than I should have, until she turned and saw me. She didn't speak, didn't ask why I was awake. She just looked at me as if trying to decide whether to send me back to bed or let the silence explain itself. Finally, she said, "You should rest." "I can't," I whispered. "Try." "I'll try if you will." Her mouth curved, just barely. The first real expression I'd seen on her face. We stayed there a moment longer. Then she nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Good night, Nikki." It was the first time she said my name. Just a name, but it landed heavier than any sentence I'd delivered in court. When I finally went back to my room, the storm outside had softened, but something inside me had not. The line between protection and something far more dangerous was beginning to blur, and no law I knew could define it. The morning started too quiet. The air carried that strange stillness New York gets before a storm, as if the whole city was holding its breath. Jennifer had already checked the route twice before I stepped outside. The SUV waited at the curb, the windows shining like mirrors. I felt the weight of every eye that followed me from the building to the car. Jennifer held the door open, expression neutral. "We'll take the expressway and switch lanes every mile. Stay low if I tell you." Her voice was measured, stripped of softness. I nodded, though I barely listened. Something inside me was already tight with unease. When the doors closed, the city vanished behind tinted glass. We drove through Lower Manhattan. The streets blurred by, gray and wet, reflections sliding off metal and concrete. The rain began, faint at first, then heavier, drumming against the roof in steady rhythm. Jennifer sat up front beside the driver, her gaze fixed ahead. Every so often her hand brushed the radio, adjusting channels that answered only with static. "Signal's weak," the driver said. "Stay on frequency B," Jennifer replied. Her tone didn't change, but I could feel the shift in the air. My pulse began to match the sound of the wipers. The courthouse wasn't far. I told myself it would be fine, that she was only being cautious. But her eyes in the mirror told me otherwise. Traffic slowed as we approached the bridge. Cars pressed close, red brake lights glowing through the mist. Jennifer's hand went to her shoulder mic. "All units, confirm movement." Static again. No reply. She looked at the driver. "Pull right. Reduce speed." "What's wrong?" I asked. Interference, she said. Could be nothing. The SUV rolled forward another few yards. Then the driver stiffened. Truck ahead just stopped. I leaned forward, peering between the seats. A delivery van blocked both lanes under the overpass, doors closed, no hazard lights. My stomach dropped. Reverse, Jennifer ordered. The driver shifted gears, but a horn blared behind us. Another vehicle had pulled up too close. Jennifer's voice changed, lower now, clipped. Stay down. I didn't move fast enough. The first shot shattered the front windshield, glass bursting inward. Sound exploded, deafening, chaotic. The driver cursed, jerking the wheel. Jennifer pushed me down, her body slamming against mine as another bullet tore through the passenger mirror. Time warped. The world shrank to noise, flashes, and the smell of gunpowder. I felt her weight against me, her breath near my ear. Don't move, she said, barely audible. More shots cracked against metal. The car rocked from impact. Jennifer reached across the seat, pulled open the door, and shouted something I couldn't hear. Rain rushed in, cold and sharp. She fired twice, the muzzle flash painting the inside of the vehicle in white light. Ouch, she said. I hesitated. She grabbed my hand, dragging me into the storm. Water hit my face like shards. We sprinted toward the concrete divider, crouching behind it. The air stank of smoke and rain. Are you hit? She asked. No, I gasped. You. She checked her arm, a smear of red spreading beneath her jacket. Just a graze. A sharp ache bloomed in my chest. I looked down, saw the tear in my blouse, the bruise already darkening beneath the fabric. The bulletproof vest she'd insisted I wear had stopped the round, but the impact burned like fire. Jennifer reached out, her hand pressing over the mark. You're okay, she said. It stopped it. Breathe. Her voice steadied me more than air did. I caught her wrist before she pulled away. You shouldn't have. Her eyes locked on mine. I had to. Another shot rang out, closer this time. She turned, firing back in controlled bursts. Her movements were pure precision, no panic, no wasted motion. Rain streamed down her face, catching light from distant sirens. The sound of police vehicles grew nearer. The attackers began to scatter. Jennifer rose slightly, scanning the overpass, then dropped again beside me. 2 shooters. One moving right. Stay down. I'm not leaving you. You're not in charge here, Judge. I almost laughed at the absurdity, but the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't command. It was desperation masked as order. Minutes dragged until the sirens finally cut through the chaos. The gunfire ceased. The only sounds left were rain and distant shouting. Jennifer lowered her weapon, her breathing rough, not from fear but from restraint. Clear, someone yelled. She helped me stand. My knees felt weak. The driver stumbled from the car, blood on his sleeve but alive. Police swarmed the scene. Cameras flashed at the edge of the barricade, drawn by the chaos. Jennifer guided me toward the ambulance, her hand firm on my shoulder. Sit here, she said, voice calm again, the calm of someone rebuilding walls fast. Inside, the paramedic checked my chest, muttering about bruising and shock. I barely heard him. My eyes were fixed on her outside the open doors. She stood in the rain, soaked, speaking into her radio. Her jaw was clenched, eyes scanning the perimeter even as officers surrounded her. When she turned, our eyes met. Something in me gave way. She walked toward the ambulance, steps steady despite the exhaustion in her frame. How bad? She asked the medic. She's fine, he replied. Vest caught it. Jennifer nodded. Relief flickered across her face before she hid it. You took a bullet for me, I said. That's my job. No, it isn't. Not like that. She looked away, rain sliding from her chin. You're alive. That's all that matters. The paramedic gestured for her to sit. She ignored him. I reached out, catching her wrist. The touch stopped her. The pulse beneath my fingers was fast. You're bleeding, I said. It's nothing. It's not nothing. For a moment she didn't move. Then she stepped closer, voice quieter. You need to rest. I need to know why you keep putting yourself between me and every bullet in this city. Because that's what it takes. That's not an answer. Her expression softened, barely. It's the only one I have right now. The words settled between us, heavy and electric. I felt it before I decided to act, the pull that had been building since the first day. I leaned forward, closing the distance. She didn't stop me. The kiss was quick, rough, alive. It tasted like rain and adrenaline and something neither of us was ready to name. When I pulled back, the air felt different. She exhaled slowly, eyes still on me. You shouldn't have done that. Then stop me. She didn't. Outside, the sirens faded into the distance, leaving only the steady rhythm of water on asphalt. Jennifer rested a hand briefly on my shoulder, her touch careful, deliberate. We'll get you to the hospital, she said. Then we'll figure out the rest. In the reflection of the ambulance window, I saw her standing there, soaked and unshakable, a soldier made of lightning and rain. The city blurred behind her, but she was the only clear thing in the storm. And as the doors closed, I realized the line between protection and something far more dangerous was gone. Whatever had begun between us wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a point of no return, written in blood and thunder. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and metal, the air cold enough to sting. I spent most of the night awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between the monitor beeps. The pain in my ribs was dull, but the ache under my skin refused to fade. Jennifer sat by the door, jacket folded over a chair, head tilted slightly as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Her shoulder was bandaged. She had refused painkillers, refused rest, refused everything that would make her human for a moment. When dawn seeped through the blinds, an older man in a federal badge walked in. His presence froze the room. Agent Hale, he said, not even glancing at me. You're relieved of duty pending review. Jennifer rose immediately, her posture flawless. Sir, she's still under threat. Until we secure. He cut her off. That's no longer your concern. Internal Affairs will contact you by noon. I sat up, ignoring the protest of my body. You're removing her now? After what she just did? He looked at me the way men in power always look when they believe procedure outweighs reason. This isn't personal, Justice Cross. It's protocol. You'll be assigned a new detail. I decline. That's not an option. When the door closed behind him, the silence left behind felt heavier than gunfire. Jennifer remained standing, eyes fixed on the blank wall. I wanted to speak, but every sentence that came to mind sounded too small. She finally said, "They're doing their job." "So are you," I replied. Her lips twitched, a half smile that didn't last. "Doesn't feel that way anymore." I wanted to reach out, to erase the distance the badge demanded, but I stayed still. "You saved my life. There's nothing in their rules that can turn that into a crime." She didn't answer. She just picked up her jacket, slid one arm through the sleeve, and said quietly, "You should rest." Before I could stop her, she was gone. The following days moved like a broken film reel, looping through motions without meaning. The agents assigned to replace her were efficient, polite, and completely empty. They shadowed me everywhere, reporting each movement to someone unseen. My home felt colder, even with every light on. Her absence was an echo that refused to fade. Work became my only defense. I buried myself in case files until the words blurred. Yet every so often, I found myself looking toward the door, expecting her to walk in, to tell me to move, to argue about safety, to exist. She never did. 2 weeks later, I decided waiting wasn't justice. I had spent my entire career standing behind the law, believing truth was enough. But truth without courage was just paper. I needed to see her. Quantico was 3 hours away by train. The morning was pale, brittle with cold. I wore a plain coat, left my escort behind with a fabricated meeting on my schedule. By the time the train pulled into Virginia, the sky had shifted to steel. The federal training compound stretched wide across the fields, all brick and discipline. A guard stopped me at the gate, his hand hovering near his weapon until I showed my credentials. He blinked when he read the name. Purpose of visit? Professional inquiry, I said, then added after a pause, and personal. He didn't know how to respond to that. After a short call on his radio, the gate lifted. Inside, the corridors smelled like gun oil and dust. The sound of target practice echoed faintly through the concrete halls. I followed the noise until I reached an open range. The air was crisp, dry, filled with the steady rhythm of gunfire. Jennifer stood at the far end, protective glasses glinting under fluorescent light. Her stance was exact, every shot landing clean through the center of the target. When the relay ended, she lowered her weapon, sliding it onto the table. She saw me before I spoke. Her eyes widened, not in shock, but in disbelief. You shouldn't be here. I closed the case, I said. No more hearings, no more appeals. I'm not your assignment anymore. That's not why you shouldn't be here. I stepped closer, the smell of gunpowder sharp in the air. Then tell me why. She hesitated, then looked down, checking the safety on her gun though it was already on. Because this place runs on rules I can't bend for you. I'm not asking you to bend them. I'm asking you to see me. Her gaze lifted slowly. The light hit her face, cutting across her features like the memory of a scar. I've seen too much already. Then stop pretending that night didn't happen. She flinched barely. You kissed me because you were scared. No, I said. I kissed you because I wasn't anymore. The truth landed between us like another bullet. She exhaled, long and quiet. You think you want this? You don't know what it costs. I know exactly what it costs. I've spent years sentencing people for pretending they didn't. The corners of her mouth curved, this time without bitterness. You're relentless. It's the only way anything ever changes. For a moment, no one spoke. The range was silent except for the faint crack of shots from another room. Then she took one step forward. You shouldn't have come. I had to, I said. Because if you're going to walk away, you'll have to do it while I'm looking at you. Her jaw tightened. The walls she built so carefully began to fracture. You think this is easy for me? I think it's real for both of us. Something in her face broke open, the calm dissolving into something raw. She reached out, then stopped herself. We can't, she said, the words barely sound. I closed the distance. We already did. Her hand found mine before her mind could stop it. For a moment, the noise, the walls, the rules all vanished. I could feel the tremor under her skin, the heat, the restraint. Then she pulled me closer, and our mouths met. The kiss was slower than before, deliberate, certain. There was no fear in it this time, no adrenaline, only the recognition of something neither of us could control anymore. Her hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me steady, as if to remind me we were still alive, still here. When she finally drew back, her breath shuddered. This will destroy my career. Then let it, I said. She almost smiled, shaking her head. You have no idea what it means to stand against this machine. Maybe not, I whispered, but I know what it means to stand for something. Her radio crackled before she could respond. A supervisor called for her by name. She stepped back, pressing the mic to her shoulder. On my way, she said, voice flat again. When the line went quiet, she looked at me once more. I have 10 minutes before I have to report. After that, this conversation never happened. 10 minutes is more than we had before. She gave a short, breathless laugh. You never stop arguing. Not when it matters. We stood there, two people who belonged to systems built to erase people like us, both knowing neither system could undo what had just been said. When her instructor called again, she straightened, mask slipping back into place. I have to go, she said. I know. She brushed a hand against my wrist, barely there. You're impossible. And you're still here, I said. That was the last thing between us before she turned and walked toward the firing lane. The sound of gunfire started again, steady, precise, unyielding. I left the range without looking back, but the echo followed me down the hallway, every shot a reminder that some truths, once spoken, don't fade. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain. I realized I wasn't afraid of storms anymore. Winter faded into a hesitant spring. The city softened around its edges. Sirens still cut through the nights, but the wind carried the smell of thaw instead of smoke. The case that had rewritten my life existed now only in headlines gathering dust. I returned to my courtroom, to the weight of law and silence. Yet something in the rhythm had changed. My hands no longer trembled when I picked up the gavel. They felt grounded. The world had cracked and then found its balance again. Jennifer's name drifted through conversations in clipped tones. The investigation ended quietly. There was no punishment, no apology, only a reassignment buried in bureaucracy. She would train new agents now, far from the field, somewhere near Quantico's northern range. When the letter arrived confirming it, I traced her name with my thumb and smiled at how permanent the ink looked. For weeks I wrote rulings by day and sat by my window at night, staring at the river. The light of the bridges flickered like heartbeat lines. I kept my phone beside me, waiting without admitting that I was. The message finally came on a Friday evening, a simple text that said, after 7 p.m. When the knock came, it sounded softer than I remembered. I opened the door to find her standing there without uniform, without badge, dressed in the quiet color of someone who wanted no attention. Her hair was damp from the rain, her hands holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of food. "You didn't ask for this," she said. I didn't have to. For a second, neither of us moved. The air felt charged, fragile. Then she stepped inside, setting the bag on the counter. "I thought we should eat before we say anything we can't take back." That sounds like a warning. It's dinner. We cooked together without coordination, colliding at corners, brushing sleeves, laughing once when a pan hissed too loud. The sound felt like something breaking free. The kitchen filled with light and the smell of garlic. When we finally sat down, the plates were mismatched, the table half cleared of old files. None of it mattered. "How's training?" I asked. "They listen," she said. "Mostly. And you?" "I listen too. I tell them rules are tools, not walls. Some understand. Others don't." I smiled. "That sounds dangerously philosophical for federal training. They need to learn that control isn't everything." "And did you?" Her eyes lifted from her plate, steady, unreadable. "I'm still learning." The honesty in her voice pulled me forward. It wasn't an admission of weakness. It was surrender to truth. We finished dinner slowly, letting silence fill the gaps. When she reached for the dishes, I caught her wrist. "Leave them," I said. She studied me for a heartbeat. "You still like giving orders?" "Only when I know they'll be followed." She didn't move away. The distance between us shrank until it was just the length of breath. The kiss began without urgency, soft and certain, the kind that made every sound fade. The world beyond the walls dissolved into the quiet rhythm of two people remembering how to exist in the same space. When she drew back, her eyes were darker, softer. "You realize this is impossible," she whispered. "So is ignoring it." Her hand moved to the back of my neck, fingers tracing the edge of my hair. "You're supposed to be the rational one." "Maybe that's why this feels right," I said. She laughed, low and quiet. "You and your verdicts." "Guilty," I murmured. We didn't talk about rules after that. The night settled around us like a secret we had both chosen to keep. Rain tapped against the windows, softer than before. I felt her heartbeat under my palm, a steady rhythm that grounded me more than any statute ever had. Later, we sat on the couch, half covered by a blanket, a record spinning on the old turntable. The music was crackled and warm. Her hand rested over mine, her thumb tracing idle patterns on my skin. "You ever think about walking away from all of it?" she asked. "Every day," I said. "But I don't. Because the law still needs people who remember it's human." She nodded. "Then promise me one thing." "What?" "If you ever leave the bench, do it because you're ready, not because of me." I could ask you the same. "If I ever come back to the field, it'll be because I can stand in it without looking over my shoulder for you." The way she said it wasn't cold. It was clarity. The kind that carried both freedom and restraint. We stayed like that until the record ended, the last note stretching into silence. She turned her head slightly. You know, for someone who lives by rules, you're dangerously good at breaking them. Only the ones that never made sense, I replied. Her smile faded into something gentler. Then maybe we write new ones. I leaned closer. Together. Together, she said. Time felt slower after that. She poured us wine. We talked about the small things we had both forgotten mattered. The terrible coffee at the courthouse, the noise of sirens that could lull a person to sleep, the stray cat that had begun haunting her training dorm. Every word rebuilt something ordinary between us, something stronger than secrecy. When it grew late, she stood by the door, holding her coat but not wearing it. The city lights painted her skin in fragments of gold. I should go, she said. You don't have to. I do, she replied, smiling faintly. Because if I stay, I might not. I took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm, the proof of everything she'd survived. Then promise you'll come back. Her gaze met mine. I'll come back when it feels like living, not hiding. She leaned in once more, her lips brushing my cheek. Good night, Nikki. Good night, Jennifer. The door closed behind her, quiet, final, and yet not an ending. I stood there for a long time, listening to the city breathe. Outside, the rain eased into a mist that glowed beneath the street lamps. My reflection stared back from the window, tired and whole. I realized that love wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the floor. I brewed coffee, fed the silence, and smiled when my phone buzzed. A message, short and simple, home. After. I typed back without hesitation. Always. Weeks passed, and the world moved again. Trials resumed, new faces came and went. At night, we traded small notes, fragments of a life being rebuilt. She sent photos from the training range, her target sheets punctured clean through the center. I sent her the view from my bench, the courthouse bathed in morning gold. Sometimes she called late, her voice low, tired, alive. We never talked about danger anymore. We talked about living. When spring fully arrived, she came back for a weekend. We walked the promenade by the river, coffee in hand, the skyline cutting against a sky finally blue. People brushed past us, unaware, uncaring. She reached for my hand and didn't let go. I used to think balance was a scale, I said. She looked at me, eyes warm. And now? Now I think it's a pulse. Her fingers tightened around mine. Then let's keep it steady. The city shimmered before us, imperfect and alive. I realized then that the law I had sworn to serve had always been about choices, not absolutes. So was love. We walked until the wind changed, until the world felt wide enough to hold both. And somewhere between the sound of water and the hum of traffic, I knew this was not a story about protection or danger anymore. It was about what came after. Love is not always born in calm places. Sometimes it rises from chaos, from danger, from moments when breathing itself feels uncertain. Nikki and Jennifer were never meant to find each other in safety, yet somehow they did. Between the rules and the risks, they chose something braver: truth. In every heartbeat, in every silent glance, they learned that love is not against the law. It's the reason we survive it. This is their story, not about duty, but about desire that refused to hide. You're watching She and SG.